everyone, this is Isaiah Houston from Brown Game YGO. I'm here to show you my deck profile from Richmond, Virginia, where I got top 32, 16 after Swiss. I'm not sure if most people like to see an in-person deck profile, but I wanted to give you guys more of a recap and analysis of my tournament experience. And if you like more of that versus in-person, then definitely let me know in the comments down below. But I thought this would be a good way, since there's not a lot of real events for the rest of the year, to kind of give my thoughts and analysis and go deeper than just maybe a 8 to 10 minute deck profile. So let's get right into it. A couple weeks before at YCS Indy, I had finished 33rd place with my Rescue Ace deck. I was feeling good coming into the event, even though it was a blind format. That was simply just because I playtested Rescue Ace for a while. I really liked the deck. A lot of times when you play decks that you enjoy, you tend to do better. And I thought I built it pretty versed. Definitely could have been better. And then getting to the tournament, I finished 9-2, but my tiebreakers just weren't good enough. If you did watch the actual profile that I did, there was two cards I was kind of hiding or just not showing yet. It was Cross Out Designator. I really liked that card going into the mirror match. We can cross out hand traps that may try to stop your turbulence. You can cross out engines. You can cross out turbulence in the mirror match. It's just a good card. I cited that too, just because it was not something that I wanted to slog on. Something that I see. If I don't, I don't. Even going second, it can hit traps in the mirror if that's your strategy or your game plan, and that's just really strong in general. I'm not going to spend too much time on the 33rd place list or that deck itself, but I did want to kind of go over that as it kind of went up to Richmond and show you where my head was at going into that event. After Rescue Ace had won, people went into the event expecting a lot of tier elements, expecting some ace, and tier element didn't really do as well just because it was just so heavily cited for. We did see decks like Vanadium and Pearly do well, and seeing that shift going into Richmond, what people should have been expecting was a lot of ace, but a lot of Pearly, a lot of Vanadium, and still a lot of tier, because tier is the deck that even if no one's prepared for it, it's still very strong, and it's not always dice roll dependent. That's probably one of the only decks that really doesn't need to play a lot of non-engine to do well, so it's still a scary deck to play against. So that was kind of like my mindset of trying to build to beat those decks, and then going along with that, I was like, okay, I wanted to test a few things. I wanted to test Fenrir in the list, so I tested Fenrir. My thoughts on the card is just a really strong go first card, but it's below average go second card. It can be good in certain scenarios, but I just rather have a hand trap. So I wanted to test, did having Fenrir going first really increase my win percentage? That card really didn't make the cut. I just wanted hand traps over it. And then I decided to test the going with no impulse, no engine, or just different ratios at 3. It's no correct ratio on impulse. I think you can get away with having no impulse, having 1, having 3, pros and cons to both. I ended up cutting engine and going down to 41 and just sticking with the 1 impulse. Impulse is just really good, being able to turn off boss monsters that would be otherwise unaffected. And it's just a good utility card just to have in certain game states that are simplified. Like you can negate a Caesar or a Soul of Rage, and they can't really link off with the impulse. If you normal summon it, maybe you have field spell. There's a lot of situations where impulse was good, so I didn't want to cut it completely from the list. But engine, I felt like while it was good in certain scenarios, it was a card that didn't really have a big impact on my win or loss percentage. And then if I did go to 3 impulse, then I would have decided to side the attacker, because that was good into matchups like Flow and help dig for more hand traps. But I decided to go with 1. We still saw a lot of main deck draw at Richmond, and I really didn't want to main the card. I feel like the card was really only good against Vanadium and only sometimes good against Pearly. It's really good if you go first against Pearly, because it stops Happy, can stop a lot of their plays, and it was good for me going into Richmond. But it's not a card I wanted in the main deck. It was a card that I really felt was below average against most decks. And just a PSA, please stop siding this card against Rescue Ace. The card is terrible. Yes, it has application, but it doesn't stop the set 4. 9 out of 10 times your opponent will set 4 after you draw them, so you go negative card. So the other thing I just want to touch on is Lightning Storm Evenly. It's something that is actually interesting. I'm not going to spend too long about it, but I'm going to say what I thought about this. If you notice, the winner of YCS Indy, he actually played one duster. I also played one duster. I don't really know why he played one duster, but my logic behind the card was I want to have some type of back row hate. I didn't want to go with none at all. Seems kind of weird to kind of have one because like you may draw it, may not. Why not just go with 0? But I guess you just don't want to have no outs. And then like prosperity, I guess you can maybe count as a potential to dig into the card. So I just ultimately went with duster, and I'll continue to play that unless the format shifts to more back row heavy strategies. I really did a deep analysis and felt like Storm wasn't a card I wanted in my deck list, and it's not a card that I don't think a lot of decks really should be citing unless you're expecting to play a lot of maybe like Lab or Runic Stun, which I'm not really preparing to play a lot of. And I'm just hoping my engine is just good enough to beat those decks within a tournament. Just because Lightning Storm, I'm never citing in the mirror. I just feel like hand traps would be better. I'd rather stop the problem than actually allow them to set 4. So if I was scared of that mirror, I would rather, instead of citing Lightning Storm, just overcompensate and just play more Turbulence outs and play chills. And if you take that overcompensation route, you can get to about 15 cards. Nib, Ash, Veiler, Moonlit Chill, Imperm, that sort of fit the role of if you draw any of these 2 combination pairs, that should stop your opponent from setting 4. Same thing with Evenly. Evenly is actually a tad worse. Evenly, I don't think should be anyone's deck list. I think Lightning Storm has merits, especially in other decks, but I just think in this current state of Yu-Gi-Oh, skipping your battle phase is just too costly. So that's why I didn't choose to really respect back row as much. And then going into Richmond, I stuck with Ace just because I thought it was the deck that was able to play around hand traps and then give me a consistent enough win condition round after round. And then really only had one bad matchup, which was Tier Element. At the end of the day, Cross Out also didn't make the list. Going through, I don't wish I played it. I don't side judgment. I think Cross Out would have been fine if I played it, but I didn't play against a lot of Ace. And I don't think it's the determining factor. But especially with Econ being a card, I think that I probably may make space for it. It's just hard to say because I'm coming into the event with, in hindsight now, but at the end of the day, Cross Out is still a good card because what people don't understand about Cross Out, it's not a card that, especially in this case I'm using it for, it's not a card where I'm like, okay, I'm not building my deck around Cross Out. I'm using it as the second and third call by the grave, or using it as a card that is going to help stop what I lose to in a potential mirror match or whatever the case may be. And then the event went pretty smoothly. I finished 16th after Swiss.
In 16th place, Isaiah Thomas Houston. Beast mode, baby!
That was X1 after day 1, 9-2 after day 2. Going into top 32, played against 3 Pearly, 3 Tier, 1 Unchained, 1 Ace, 1 Pure Gold Pride, 1 Runic Stun, and 1 Vanadium. People say that Pearly's a bad matchup. Obviously, just depends on player skills. I think it's just a game that has to still be played very well on both sides by each player. It's not a really hard matchup at all if you know how to play against the deck, but you do have to play differently than you would play against any other matchup, just because Pearly Street's a really good card. The only matchup that I lost was against Tier. That's the only matchup that I'm expected not to be favored in, going first or second, just given how the explosiveness of the deck is, and given that Super Poly Nib are cards. Super Poly deals with my weak boards that are built on a lot of follow-up and a lot of advantage, and Nib kind of deals with the unfair boards that I kind of need to give me a better chance against Super Poly, so that it does provide a dilemma when going into Tier. A lot of the times, though, going into Tier, I would say you don't really know. You do have one advantage. The fact that people will try to overcompensate for Dweller, that can give you an opportunity to try to take advantage of that and see what you can from there, knowing that Nib will probably be in their deck at some capacity. Maybe you can kind of play into it, maybe add a talent or thrust type of strategy, but then people may also side Encore or Droplets, so that's another thing. A lot of the times against Tier, if I do have enough combo, I would go for the Cyburst package and just go full into Nib, because I know that if I do get Nib, Lightning Storm is probably out of the question, and I'd much rather get Nibbed or Super Polys than get Stormed. And if they have the duster, they have the duster, right? One thing I did switch from utility to sight burst just because I never liked the Jet Synchron or the Isolde Ricadetto stuff. What the sight burst package allowed me to do was help me play around Super a little better, give me 2 interruptions before. It just gave me an option that I really liked. I feel like I really didn't need my extra deck as much. I didn't feel like Super Poly was good enough to build my extra deck around. I'd rather have the sight burst package that also deals with Pearly as well. It's pretty good against tier if you don't get nibbed. I'd rather them have to commit to the board and try to super poly the terahertz than to try to super poly my board of my monsters. So I can get those monsters to stick to the board longer and I can win the game if those monsters stay on the field, especially knowing that I play Reinforce. And then I went with the condensed package because it allowed me 1 extra spot. I really wanted to play Goddess in my deck. Came up once in the tournament where I really needed it. The last thing I'd say as I kind of close the deck profile out, I really thought my indie list was a lot better. It was a lot more well thought out. Kind of made this list last minute after testing a whole lot of like theories and things that I thought about in my head, and a lot of my side really wasn't thought out. Going back, would I change it? I got into top 32. I gave myself a chance to win. I felt like the deck performed well. The only thing I would just do is just put in more hand traps, put in a third nib, tail the cowboy. Reinforce wasn't as good this tournament as it was last tournament, but I would still stick with it since I had success with the card for a while. It beats those board breakers. At least if you get stormed, you're able to reset the rescue. You're able to reset different cards. Whereas milled against tier is really good. If your opponent doesn't talent you, they have to deal with a potentially 3,500, 4,500 turbulence. So I just think it's a good card. I would just add more nibs, probably put in the cross out. Those are only real changes. At the end of the day, what actually cost me the tournament was really my deck list. As I said in my other video, as long as you put in the work, you don't have to worry about your deck list being perfect. It's more so about just playing well, playing perfectly, and understanding the games within the game. When you do that, you're able to give yourself a chance to win. I lost top 32 to Steven Santoli, the winner of YCS Indy, and like game 2 was pretty weird. I could have played better. Otherwise, I'm just pretty happy with my tournament overall and looking to do better next time. And I hope you guys got some sort of insight from this. And definitely like and subscribe to the channel. Join the Discord down below. Will be in the description. And then just continue to follow because in this time I'll be posting a lot of content that's going to help a lot of people maybe get their first invite, maybe get their first YCS top coming in 2024. And just keep on going. Shout out to everyone that I test with, my testing partners. Shout out to Team Inspire. Shout out to everyone from New York, from the locals that support me, from my friends, family, and people in the YuGiOh community that I've met and that cheer me on as well and give me support. So I really appreciate that. And just looking forward to doing more great things. Stand your ground, everyone.
Stand your ground.